All right, so we're on the last element of the standard, 11E, and it says discuss the origins, the growth, the influence, and the tactics of labor unions. Okay, so if business is growing, you're obviously going to face some issues between workers and management, and so eventually people are going to, they recognize that there's strength in numbers, so they're going to get together and labor unions are going to form, and they're going to focus on improved working conditions and wages and things like that. So we're going to focus on labor unions. We're going to focus on one in particular, the American Federation of Labor. And so you need to be able to kind of describe how they came about, how they grew, what their influence were, and what tactics they used to, get workers what they needed and wanted. All right, so, again, late 1800s, working conditions are real poor, wages are pretty low. Most people are not super educated, aren't super skilled, and so they're, they don't earn a whole lot of money. As people continue to get hurt on the job or, families face starvation and eviction from their homes, workers recognized that there were strength in numbers. So they kind of gathered together in groups to demand better pay and safer working conditions. Eventually, out of that, you're going to have some kind of an organization formed. That's typically how society works. So again, labor union is one of your vocabulary terms, and it's an organization of skilled or unskilled workers relying on collective bargaining, meaning they work together to determine what their demands are and then go to management and bargain back and forth. So they give a little to get a little. Hey, we want higher wages, but we're willing to work an extra hour, or we want health insurance, so we're willing to do these things or give these concessions. The problem is that management isn't always going to give in. Both parties that come to the table aren't always going to give the other party what they want, or they're not willing to meet them halfway, or whatever the case may be. Okay, so when collective bargaining doesn't work, labor unions resort to stopping work altogether. And they resort to striking or shutting down production. Okay, in the case of the railroads, they'll just stop working. The railroads won't run, so goods aren't transported. Maintenance isn't done to the railroad tracks and things like that. So it just transportation altogether shuts down, which impacts businesses and the economy. Two examples of labor unions are the Knights of Labor, but the American Federation of Labor is the one I want you to focus on, or the AFL. Again, that's one of your vocabulary terms. So by definition, the American Federation of Labor is a labor union that used collective bargaining, but they didn't see capitalism as the enemy. They actually saw it as something that they could work with. Okay. Again, the American Federation of Labor, it's a labor union that's created by Samuel Gompers in 1886. He started out as an immigrant, and he was a cigar maker. He recognized that craftsmen weren't being valued, weren't being well paid or well taken care of. So he organized only skilled workers. He only brought workers, not the unskilled factory workers. And he organized them by craft. He promoted practical goals that would improve the life of workers. So maybe a shortened work day, or some safer working conditions. Something that's very practical that management can do. Just by their sheer size, they had over 1 million members by 1901. They were successful. He got a lot of what he demanded. Just by their sheer numbers, they kind of run society. So if those workers stop, then you don't have anything. So what's the impact of labor unions? Well, one, they're going to bring awareness to the growing division. Let me get my video out of the way. The growing division between management and labor. Management really is separate from labor workers. They're treated differently. They're compensated differently. They're taken care of differently. And the issue of working conditions is different between management and labor, obviously. Labor's right there in the thick of it. A great book to read would be The Jungle, to see how factory workers were treated. But labor unions are going to bring different levels of workers together so that they start looking out for one another. And eventually, if you go on strike, if you've ever seen a strike, and you can Google videos of strikes that have happened, peaceful strikes, violent strikes, sometimes, things turn violent. You're angry at somebody because they're not looking out for your best interest. They're putting your life or your family's life in danger. So things can turn violent between management and labor. Even between, labor on strike and innocent bystanders or management. An example, would be the Haymarket protests, the Homestead Steel Factory strike. There's also the Pullman strike. Remember when we talked about in one of the previous videos or notes, the Pullman sleeping car. Okay, so railroad workers were requiring better working conditions and pay. At the time, their pay was pretty low, and Pullman workers lived kind of in little neighborhoods or groups. Their wages were cut, and their rent wasn't lowered. So a lot of them were facing starvation and eviction. And they went on strike. They went to the table and asked Pullman for, higher wages, and he, completely turned them down. The labor unions went to the government. This is where Labor Day is created, by the way. It was kind of a small gesture to say, here's a day off. Take a break from your hard labor. Okay, so, you need to kind of look at labor unions and how they, why they exist, what need in society developed for them to be created. Organizations are created out of need in society, and workers needed to be looked out for, working conditions needed to be managed, fair wages need to be paid, okay?